Have you ever learned 30 new words and forgotten almost all of them a week later? If that happens to you, it doesn't mean you have a bad memory. In this video, I'll explain to you why it happens and what you can do instead. First of all, we need to understand that our brain decides what is important and what not. The point is that our brain is constantly forgetting information, and we should be very thankful for this, because otherwise we would remember everything, every tiny detail forever. And on one hand, this would be quite cool because we would recall everything in detail. But on the other hand, it would drive us insane because we're not supposed to remember that much information. The real question isn't actually why you keep forgetting words. It's why your brain decides to keep some and throw away others. The second thing we need to be aware of is recognition. Recognition is very important in foreign language learning, but we have to understand that recognition isn't learning per se. Let's say you're reading a text in your target language and you recognize a word, your brain tells you that you've seen that word before in a different context. And now you may think, hey, I've learned a new word, that's really good. But the point here is that recognizing a word is different from using it by yourself. Because if you want to use it yourself, you need to be aware of the context in which this word can be used. A good example is that quite some people think that they speak or understand a language, a foreign language they have never studied, by just reading a random text and telling you, hey, I actually recognize this word and this word. It makes sense. But when you really want to speak a language, you need to be able to use that specific word on the spot when talking to a native speaker, for example. So how does our brain know whether a word is important or not? It's very simple. By using context. This is why you should always learn new words in your target language in context. So this can be in a small sentence, for example. Let's say I mentioned the English word umbrella. By tomorrow, you might have already forgotten it. But imagine I'm telling you, yesterday it started raining and I used my umbrella. Now your brain is more likely to remember this word because you got the context. And this context consists of an emotion, a picture, and a situation. And that's why it's much easier to retrieve, because your brain has actually something very practical this word has to do with. And this explains why context is so important in foreign language learning. Something really important we need to add to context is repetition. And when it comes to learning new words, your brain doesn't only need context. I'm quite sure you're familiar with this expression. If you don't use it, you lose it. If we put this into a linguistic context, pun intended, we can say that every time our brain encounters a word, it receives another piece of evidence that this word actually matters. And this is a stronger reason why our brain would remember a word. Sometimes we may feel like we're failing just because we're struggling to remember a word. But this point is so important because it means that learning is happening. The effort of recalling information is so much more effective than passive rereading. So I would summarize everything I just said like this. Context tells your brain a word is meaningful. Repetition tells your brain it's important. And retrieval tells your brain it's worth keeping in your head. And also remember that forgetting is part of learning a new language. Because if you remember 100% of everything after seeing it once, it means that you already knew this information. Every time you learn something new, you forget it after a while. Then you remember it again and you forget less. Then you remember it again and it becomes automatic. In the end, it's important to make the words you already know easier to remember. We just have to give our brain enough reasons to keep all the new words we're learning. So to answer to the very important question, why do we keep forgetting vocabulary? It's just because our brain is selective and we should be thankful for this. That's the end of this video. I hope it was helpful to you. I'm studying Russian right now, and to be honest, the words in Russian are quite hard for me to remember because they don't look like anything in the languages I already spoke. But I'm applying the information I share with you in this video, and it's going quite well, I would say. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.